And we're back. Rise of the Savage Intellectual. This time I've been waiting a month. I finally got him. I've got Chad from Mental Joe Apparel with a Purpose. This is a bona fide charitable organization founded by Chad, a U.S. veteran who is raising money to help veterans who are not getting the help they should from whether it's the VA or whether it's their doctors or therapists. And he is doing some really groundbreaking work as far as pushing the envelope. You're going to see this all over media with guys like Dan Crenshaw, the Navy SEAL Frogman, who's real popular, who's been testifying in front of Congress about getting veterans help through psychedelics. And as a holistic coach, we've been onto this for a while, talking to people about dealing with their shadow and dealing with their trauma and dealing with that. And over the last, let's say, maybe 3 to 5 years, it's started to really push to the forefront of psychedelics and helping veterans with PTSD. So welcome, Chad. I appreciate your time, brother.
Hey, man, I appreciate you having me on. I'm glad we could finally nail this damn date down and chat it up a little bit. So
yeah, and I just figured out why I'm pixelated. So I've got this little internet thing up in the corner, and I forgot that a couple episodes ago I started doing this from wireless, so I had like some better light, and that's probably I need to hardwire back in. So the good news is you won't be pixelated, so we'll just do all the cutups of this just of you.
Beautiful. Yeah, people are going to run for the hills after that now.
So Chad, I did a previous Savage Intellectual episode with a gentleman, I believe, that put us together, which was Mike Mannion from Healing Frontline Heroes. And Mike had, I believe, put me onto you. And I'll tell my side of it, but I'd love for you to give a little bit of your background, who you are, where you've been, and what Mental Joe is.
Yeah, so Chad Mclean, father of 2 little boys, Connor and Colin, and married to my beautiful wife, Carrie, for 8 years now. I guess, give the 10,000-foot version to a lot of people out there that don't know me or don't know who Mental Joe is. And so long story short, roughly about 4.5 years ago, I almost took my life. Sadly, like many other veteran stories, I wouldn't use the word or term addicted really, because I knew what the standard was, but sadly I fell down in those valleys of, loathing and victimhood and everything else. And, really was popping pain pills, was on some kind of SSRI for 20 plus years and was drinking myself silly. Right. And hid a lot of it from a lot of family and friends. But roughly 4.5 years ago, almost took my life, and then ended up in the cuckoo bin, or as politically correct people want to say, inpatient, right? I say cuckoo bin just because immediately people know what that is, right? So went in there, and I was in there for a good week, and, complete detox of just medication to, social media, to just being on a phone and really kind of pausing in life and wondering why I was going down this rabbit hole of holding a gun to my head with tension on the trigger, in front of my wife while my boys were, sleeping in the room down the hallway. And, I was just tired. I was really wore out. My brain for 20 plus years was 100 miles an hour with, all the negative scenarios you could imagine. And the reason I think that resonates so much with veterans or first responders, your average Joes, is we all are going through that, right? We're going through something, and we don't have the emotional intelligence to, adjust to those scenarios and look at those scenarios from a different lens. We all kind of go down that negative path of, why me, and is life like this? And so my brain just went, and it was all negative. And prior to that, I was in, corporate real estate of somewhat for almost 20 years, and always a top performer. And so always had no problem going ahead and knocking things out of the ballpark. But as I was going through this inpatient stuff, my wife did some research and found ketamine. And at that time, I was like, kind of told my wife, I said, if it's petrified dog shit and it will clean up my brain and not allow this thought process, I'm open to it. Like, I was just tired of living the way I was living. And so roughly about 2 months after doing some research and stuff, I started my first ketamine session and went through the ketamine protocol. And I don't know if you want to call it an aha moment or a vision or whatever the hell you want to label it as, but roughly about that seventh or eighth ketamine session, kind of had this thing of go create an apparel company. And I knew nothing about apparel. I've always loved swag, but really didn't understand why. Well, as the vision became clearer, it was, let's have an apparel company that elicits conversations through kind of fun, different designs, right? And that be psychedelics. And so we launched, and it's been going very well. Obviously, we're a mom and pop shop. We're not big like a Grunt Style or a 9-line apparel, but I'd like to think that someday that ceiling can be broke by us and be a veteran owned apparel company that talks about mental health on the daily, right? As opposed to, oh, it's September, it's Suicide Awareness Month, or it's May, it's PTSD month, or let's talk about this stuff every single day if we can, but not in a context where it's gross. Like let's bring awareness to this. The stat right now is anywhere from 22 to 44 veterans a day take their lives, right? And that's just veterans we're talking about. We're not talking about first responders. We're not talking about your average Joes. So roughly, I mean, you're looking at anywhere from 150 to 200,000 Americans are killing themselves every single year because of mental health. And so I really think the root cause of a lot of this stuff is if we can clean up the mental health crisis we have in our society, I think that cleans up, crime. I think that cleans up the abilities of people, with, again, popping pills or going down the rabbit hole of being alcoholics or doing heroin or whatever. So that's kind of the 10,000-foot version of where Mental Geo kind of got started and where we're hoping to go someday.
I really wanted to hit that point because when I had Mike on the show, he brought up that stat, and that was the one that like really hit me in the face, was the almost 40 veterans per day. And then you reinforcing that it's veterans. Like, we're not even talking about all the other people that have mental health issues. And yeah. I'll quickly jump in here and say this. One of the things that really made me latch on to you guys and your charity was the fact that you personally would randomly check on me. And I'm very open about this. Like, I'm a big supporter of veterans, but I'm not right. So when I have guys like you who I look up to in that aspect being like, hey, are you good? And I'm like, who you're talking to me? Like you're checking on me. And I was like, man, this dude is just, that's what I said. It's like, this dude has just got a bigger picture in his vision than just, oh, let me help some people and get him some therapy, and that's the other thing you hit on. As a holistic practitioner working with fighters, I always have to say something to them like, oh, listen, the reason you performed bad wasn't just you being out of breath. It was you being out of breath because you didn't sleep, because you didn't handle your stress, right? There's always these deeper layers. And when you just said, if we were to help people with their mental health, it's a cascading exponential effect. We're going to start bringing down violence. We're going to bring down, all of these suicides, violent crimes. There's so many homelessness. There's so many ailments that we have in the society. And as we get ready in this election year, it's like everybody wants to throw everything on the social media that really doesn't have what I call teeth to change things in the long run, right? Like and I don't want to dilute or get off topic, but we all know about what's going on in the world today about, oh, this person's right and this person's right. And it's like, just let's look at the numbers. Let's just look at the numbers. Like, what's the greatest good? When you have that many people that are, if we just talk about the 40 veterans on suicide, the idea that we can sit here in a country and argue about what should be the grammar or argue about who should be competing in sports. Like, we have that ability to argue because gentlemen like yourself and other women and men go out there, serve their country, which is serving our ability to argue like assholes, right? Like, that's part of it's like you get this freedom of speech, but that doesn't exist. If you look at what's going on, there's social media platforms being banned in other countries, right? There's people now getting like a punishment for the words they use online in other countries. Like, when people say to me, hey, this country is going to hell, I'm like, I don't know. I think I do see that, but when I see gentlemen like yourself and more of the people I've met like Mike, and there's even more people I've met, it's like, I don't know if that's going to happen here. I think although we might not be a largest majority, I think we have a lot more intensity in how we want to affect. You're a father, you have children, you're a husband, you have a wife, like you have a small nucleus of family you got to take care of, and then you have larger and larger right? So to me, if you really want to make a long-term benefit, like how can we help people that has a cascading effect? So if you go out, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I've always said, you know, if you can clean up communities, right, and those communities can take care of each other, like just take it back to the olden days, right? Like we all were some part of tribe or something, and everybody was like, hey, like I'll watch your kids, and you know, you trusted that individual to watch your kids, and now I feel like we're so separated by so many different things, but we're so connected in so many different ways because of social media. But we also understand the harms of social media because the misinformation that's out there, or people that want to argue, or hey, my algorithm says this, so it only keeps me in this bubble, right? I mean, we see it with Mental Joe, right? Because we talk about psychedelics, and we get shadow banned from Instagram and Facebook all the freaking time. So it's hard for us to even grow our bandwidth on that because, like I said, we're a small mom and pop. And I've always said, like, I can't imagine if we actually had a true marketing company that knew these algorithms and knew how to, you know, kind of reword some of this stuff, where we would grow. I mean, because everybody we talk to understands our mission. They understand what we're trying to do. But that's the problem. We're so small. We're in this little niche that we can't grow because, again, I'm one guy driving this bus with the help of my wife, you know, here and there. But I can't imagine, like, how many more people we could help by, you know, growing our bandwidth. Just like you said, like, I don't really care if you're a veteran or a first responder or whatever. Just like you, like, I reached out to you because I knew you were hurting. I knew you were in a bad mental capacity. And I was like, man, like, let's talk about it. Because at the end of the day, like, most people, it's like, well, how's the weather? It's small talk, right? And for me, I'm like, I live in Arizona. It's fucking hot here. Like how much more are you gonna, it's 110 and it's dry. Like, what is there else to talk about? You know, when I talk to people, I want to talk about, like, the deep rooted cause issues of what you're dealing with. You know, like, what's your mental capacity? Like, are you having that self-negative talk constantly that drags you down, that doesn't allow you to get up on top of that mountaintop and scream and move the boat forward, essentially? So that's why I always say, like, Mental Joe is for those veterans, those first responders, and those average Joes. I feel like us average Joes out there don't get a fair shake, right? Because we're not at the top of the spear, right? So we don't get all the best clinicians to help us with what we need to help. Or, you know, we're not on the Tony Robbins train, right? Because you can't afford to go to one of his conferences. And so I'm trying to be that guy that holds that space for that average Joe that's in, let's say, Kansas or Oklahoma, that doesn't know about psychedelics, or they know about them, but, you know, they believe the government propaganda about how bad these things are. Yet that individual goes home and drinks a fifth of, you know, vodka or GD to numb out. And there's stats out there, there's research out there, plenty of it, that shows that alcohol is one of the worst things you can have. Meanwhile, mushrooms are not addictive, and they're at the very low scale of harm. So it's like,
well, I'll give you one even better, one of my favorite quotes, and it's almost amazing to me because we were talking off camera about Joe Rogan and some other things. Yeah. Isn't it amazing how we have now entered such a different world where the comedians are the ones making the most sense, right? Yeah. Like the Hollywood stars have now become out of their mind retarded. Like, look at all the stuff from hip hop to, like, every music. Like, we're just seeing that it's just some of the, like, celebrities are just coming out and saying the dumbest stuff. And then you have comedians who are saying, like, back in the day, there was like Richard Pryor, and really George Carlin was the guy who would, like, really
love George Carlin,
right?
Right.
Would really dig into those social aspects. You don't get it now with Rogan and Andrew Schultz, and you're starting to get more of that coming back. But here's my point. Cat Williams said something in a stand-up, and this is probably already 10, 15 years old, and he talked about the difference between marijuana and Tylenol. And he goes, you know, you could smoke all this marijuana you want. You might think the guy's dead, but he's not. He's going to wake up in an hour and be hungry. He goes, but if you take a whole bottle of Tylenol, that'll be the last headache you ever have. And anyone, including a minor, can walk in and buy an entire bottle of Tylenol.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish. I get excited talking about this stuff because I got other analogies with that, but go ahead and finish that.
Yeah. So then I look at alcohol, and I come from a family that had really hard struggles with alcoholism. Really, father was a New Jersey state police officer. Still, there was one of those cops that had a very difficult time with alcohol. So I look at and just being a coach, I look at the damage. Because here's the other thing I come in my coaching world is like, well, now steroids and peptides. I mean, everybody on the internet is talking about steroids, and I admit this. This might be the first time I'm admitting it on camera. I hype up the negative effects of steroids more than there are, because I believe it's such a slippery slope. Like every fucking athlete that's coming to me is like, coach, should I? And I'm like, why are you even asking me? Your sport, regardless of which one I'm coaching in, doesn't allow it. So you get caught, you're done. Like, why are we even getting into this realm?
Yeah.
And I felt like I've always got to demonize them, when in reality, if you want to take something like not MDMA, but something like the old school, what did they call it? Ecstasy. And it's all cut up with different things. The shit that would do to your brain versus a few cycles of some testosterone. It's like, right? It's like the same thing. It's like, we're going to be perfectly okay with a world that goes home and drinks a bottle of Jack Daniels every weekend, but we don't want to tell you that mushrooms might be okay.
Yeah. Well,
right. Because we've got this established economy that we know how much money alcohol produces and makes, right? And we know how much cigarettes is the other one. I mean, it's mind blowing, but how did you, besides your experience doing the ketamine, which if you're a non-medical person, you would know this street name as Special K, introduced in that nightclub era of being a horse tranquilizer, which I felt was the same thing, right? When we talked about Joe Rogan, how quickly did all these like Don Lemons and all these journalists that we're now seeing are really morons, were like, oh, it's a horse ivermectin, right?
Yeah,
oh,
ivermectin shit, yeah.
Right. Oh, it's a horse. It was like, so is ketamine, but that doesn't mean it's not effective. And under what supervision, and why are you taking it? And what is the mindset before? So what I wanted to get into a little bit was, it's not just ketamine. Like, what is mental like when you guys are, it's like, I know the answer to the question I want to ask, and I don't want to just blurt it out. So it's like, tell me a little bit about, okay, so you have this vision, you want to do Mental Joe, you're like, I think we can do apparel. Is it just ketamine? Is it just like, who are some of the athletes you've got working? What are some of the other psychedelics you're seeing working out there? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a plethora of it, right? And you're going to hear people that I call holding space in this ecosystem, right? The psychedelic ecosystem. Everyone's always going to say, like, as long as this stuff's used in the right, setting, and you have an intention and stuff before you go in and work with what we call medicine or plant medicine, right? I think you're in a safe spot. The problem is you're going to have 10% of the population that's going to misuse this shit, just like everything else, right? And I can't control that 10%. Those people are going to do what they're going to do, regardless of what checks and balances are in place. Period. All right. It's going to happen. Same with, like you said, steroids, right? I'm on TRT. I'll be 47 this year. Like, my testosterone was super low. I'm on TRT, but it's managed. I do blood work every 6 months. Right. Same thing with psychedelics. I'm with somebody. Someone administers the ketamine to me. They set through that session with me. We talk about it. We go through the certain things that I've seen, and through that ketamine experience and the experiences, I guess you'd say, I've opened up the door, and I've gone to retreats where I've gone to Mexico, and I've done a bufo ceremony, which is DMT. Michael Mannion, in fact, held that space for me. I have done, psilocybin, magic mushrooms. I have done that. MDMA, me and my wife do that with a therapist, and it's in a very controlled environment. And it's something we do like every 6 months now. Like we sit down, we talk about this, and then we go under and we take the medicine and we sit and we have a conversation and we, because life happens and it's messy. But right now, my wife would tell you the same thing. If it wasn't for MDMA, I don't think we'd still be married.
I was going to say that. I don't want to cut you off, but that's a huge point a lot of people miss. And it's not to discount what you're going through, but the significant other of the vets
I think that's nailing the head with where you're going with that, John, is everybody wants to talk about the veteran or the first responder, right? What they forget about is the trauma that's created in that household, right? And I don't mean to talk negatively about other veteran, associations or foundations or anything, right? But let's just be honest. Like there's a lot of foundations out there that veterans go on a beautiful, hunting trip, or they go scuba diving, or they do whatever, right? Beautiful. Great. That's great for that veteran or that first responder. The problem is, after that beautiful weekend or that beautiful week, they go back to a house that has all the triggers that are still left in that house. And guess what? He or she's going to get riled up again. They're going to create the same fucking cycle that they just left. And then what? Another 5 months down the road, they're going to go do another hunting trip because they qualified for that hunting trip. And now what? And so I always argue the fact, like, talk therapy is great, but last time I was aware, there's no studies of talk therapy reconnecting neurotransmitters and cleaning up TBI issues within the brain. Guess what? Psychedelics does. And there's plenty of research for it. Unfortunately, we're fighting the big machine called the FDA and the government. A lot of veterans just went out to Washington, D.C. to advocate for the legalization of MDMA. And that got shot down. And again, if you pull back the curtain, you zoom out a little bit, you will see like there's certain pharmaceutical companies that are standing on the wayside waiting for MDMA to get legalized because they know they can capitalize on it. So it's gross because, again, psychedelics, if these things were a little bit more mainstream, I think we'd have a different society. And I think maybe, again, not being a conspiracy theorist, but if you zoom out, like, I think that's some of the issues that you see with big pharma. They realize they're going to lose a client.
Yeah. Let me throw a not popular opinion here that the people in my world will attack me on. As you know, like I walk this weird space between what I consider myself a holistic coach, holistic strength coach, but I'm not always very well liked in the holistic community because they tend to be more aggressive. I don't believe that you sit your ass out in a forest and meditate and you get the world better. Like you have to, once you learn these type of modalities of shadow work or even just simple things on digestion, like it's not good enough to sit where you are. And I have this argument with other holistic coaches because there's a huge missing element of strong masculine presence in the holistic coaching. Many of the men are just very weak. And I look at them and say, listen, you want to talk about, I love what you said before about the children. I believe, especially as a father of a 13-year-old and what I've gone through in my custody, never more has the term, it takes a village, been more apparent. Because we're seeing the negative thing when our villages are fucked up, right? Like, well, it takes a village and social media is a village and your school is a village. And here in Florida, we had to pass a Parents' Right Act because people without kids were starting to dictate what the education model was going to be. We're like, you don't even have skin in the game at this point,
Yeah.
So our communities are like going sideways. And, when I speak to holistic coaches, I'm like, you have to take this, you have to go out into the darkness with your light. And you've got to find the people your help. And if you're going to talk about us being a oneness of the community, the fact that you get to sit on your ass and be pacifistic or argue is because there's all these other people with damage that went out there and protected us. It's because you're foolish to think that the evils that go out, like when I see people being like, oh, well, we should be more like this country and this country, I'm like, just go there. When I look at the conflict in the Middle East, I spent a month living there. Go live there for a month. And I don't mean the touristy section. I lived through Judea, Samaria. I lived there for a month. Israel. I went through Muslim communities, Jewish communities. There is a disconnect from people in the government that like we have here. But there's also not what you think it is on the outside when you're watching the media.
Yeah.
And so here's my unpopular opinion. I feel part of the reason psychedelics got the bad name and they're not accessible to our veterans is because you had a bunch of holistic, non-masculine pussies like, here we go, Ram Dass. So in the holistic, I don't know if you know who Ram Dass is.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Very familiar. Yep.
Right? So my holistic coaches will be all up in arms. Here goes John and his ego. And it's like, yeah, I know. I got my ego and my demons. We're all real good friends. And but Ram Dass was a guy who was with the dude, and I'm escaping my name. His name is escaping right now. Who did like the first LSD trips, and these were the professors I think at Harvard or Stanford where this started.
Albert Hoffman.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, you guys just went fucking ape shit on this. This wasn't really what you should have been studying. Then you turned it into a fucking hippie fair, and of course you were the ones that were the anti-government movement. So
it's Tim Leary, Tim Leary and a bunch of those guys that were scientists, and I think it was tune in and drop out or something like that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of, again, I kind of have the same, I guess you'd say, stance, maybe not as aggressive, but I get that. Like, I really love some of Ram Dass's stuff. I really do get it. I really do understand it. But I think I know where you're going with this, right? And what we need to see is kind of, like I said, that middle ground of, whether you want to call it alpha males. Like, the reason I really got into this stuff too was I started listening to certain podcasts with certain Navy SEALs or SF or Rangers or other guys that I kind of looked up to, and they were going through their own Ibogaine experience and how it really helped them stop drinking and popping pills, and how it really cleaned up their TBI issues and all that other shit. And I was kind of like, these guys are like the epitome of the alpha male, right? They are at the tip of the spear. Like, these guys have seen everything. So in my realm, I was like, well, if it can help these badasses calm the nervous system and be a little bit softer sided gentlemen, like, why can't I do this? Like, I guarantee I haven't seen half the shit these guys have. So if it's helping them, I know it can help me. And so that's where I've kind of gone, is I've kind of looked at some of those big alpha males and said, well, shit, some of them are real big teddy bears now because they've gone through some really deep psychedelic healing. And that's where I've kind of, I guess my compass north was looking at them and how it's helped them. And to your point with the hippie movement, that's kind of what happened. They, in the late 60s, early 70s, MDMA, ecstasy, right, was actually, it was used for couples therapy. Like, if you go do the research on MDMA, that's essentially what it was used for. Yeah. Really? Yeah. If you dig into the research of this shit and the history of a lot of psychedelics, a lot of this stuff was used back in the 60s and 70s for trauma-induced, therapies. Sadly, it got into the wrong hands. It got publicized wrong, and boom! Before you know it, now they're Schedule Ones, and it's illegal and everything else.
Yeah, because as a person who's a history major, I look at this like, when, like, somewhere along the line we made it acceptable that the alpha burly man doesn't talk about it, has a fucking bourbon, a smoke, and be left alone, and they'll deal with it. And the soft feminine man gets to do mind expansion and dealing with the 4 dimensions. It's like, no, dude, you guys needed to take some warrior class shit. You're too feminine. And we needed these psychedelics to be like, bourbon and nicotine wasn't the answer for people dealing with trauma, but right. It's like I call it like the Clint Eastwood effect or the Yellowstone. It's like so like we kind of like put that psychedelics as a soft male hippie. And I was aware lightly that certain psychedelics were being used for some trauma research. But then once this whole, Leary and this shit and LSD went out, and then mushrooms came in, then it became like, because I'll tell you, the stigma with mushrooms and acid when I was going into college was that's what the weak men would do. Like, if you were a 120-pound punk, or we'd call him a pussy, you'd be a hippie with your hair long and you'd be doing this shit going into college. Where the real men, we were lifting weights, working out, taking our creatine, and then doing keg stands. Like, alcohol was okay.
Yeah.
But this other stuff was so much worse for you, right? Like, so
and I call it just propaganda. Let's just call it what it is. Like, in the other scenario I always give people is, give me 20 males at the ages of 21 through 45. put them in a room or in a building that's got, some ski, some darts, some bowling, whatever. Give them a bunch of activities, but a bunch of food, and alcohol is there, right? By the end of the night, there's several fights that are going to happen in that room, right?
Or stuff's getting broken at least. Stuff's getting broken at least.
Exactly. Now just go watch UFC Contender Series, right? Like those guys are fucking fighting in a house, and what's involved? Alcohol, right? Let's just put it on. Here you go. This is what happens. Like Dana White's doing it for us on the Contender Series. But now take those same alpha males, those same, whatever you want to call it, 21 to 45, put them in a room, give them all the same stuff, take out the alcohol, now put cannabis in there. You're not there. There's not going to be anybody fighting. Guarantee you that.
Yeah.
And so those two quick scenarios, you just do a study on that, and it'll show you. But like I said, Dana White's doing it for us for free in the Contender Series because you can see when those guys drink alcohol, they're all fighting and breaking shit. I just want to tell Dana, hey man, can you just do an episode where all these guys do is smoke pot and see what happens?
Dana's big on Gary Brecka now.
Yeah.
Right? So Gary's another guy that I have to I don't want to say I have to deal with, but people will send me things because half of the things Gary says are in that holistic space that I would tell my clients. And then a lot of it becomes this like fear mongering, so he just kind of goes overboard. And it's the same thing we said about other people where it's like, man, there's some really good stuff there. But then once you start going overboard, you kind of get throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Right. And I get it. We just live in this world where we've got to sensationalize so much more. Yeah. But here's the thing I want to get into. There's something you said earlier, and I made a note. I want to come back to it. So I want to say this to anybody who's listening, who's a veteran, and you're a veteran-owned or veteran-managed or veteran-run marketing company. I think this is something when I started working with you, and I want to work with you more, is I think there's some ways I might innovatively get the name out there. But Chad just made a great point. He's veteran-owned, veteran-founded. 100% of the proceeds are going to veteran, and he's in a space where other veteran charities aren't. This is not the super sexy popular, let's go do a fucking camp, we're going to scream in the river. It's like he's doing the therapy with the actual things we're talking about. He's doing them with his partner so that she's involved because you've got to change the space. Yep. If you're a veteran marketing company out there, or you're a veteran involved with a marketing company, just fucking hit Joe up. Like, even if you can't give him a ton of your time, maybe you can give him a phone call 30 minutes a week, and just help you with that marketing space, because there's got to be veterans out there that, and I know this was something that happened to me when I was a chief marketing officer of a global company that was based on holistic modalities. And we all pretty much had a gag order on us about talking out against the vaccine because we were coming right out of COVID. And as the executive members, we said to ourselves, okay, what's our main goal? Our main goal is there's people out there that are really hurting, and we need to help them. And we're not going to help them if we get shut down off of, social media because we're going anti-vaccine,
Yeah.
So, maybe you're a marketing or you're a veteran company or you're a veteran that really believes in what Chad's saying, that psychedelics are the future, but you're just handcuffed because that's where you are. Give this fucking Chad a call, DM him, talk offline. Especially as other veterans out there, I know there's got to be a marketing company, there's got to be a branding company, right?
Yeah, it's so funny, dude, because I get marketing companies reaching out to me all the time. Hey, we can 10x this, we can do this, and my reply to them is, if you can do that, let's do it, and then I'll pay you for results. And everyone's going to give you that argument. Well, you got to pay me what I'm worth. Okay, well, I've paid several marketing companies to help us with our social media, and they were garbage. I lost thousands of dollars paying these companies, and they couldn't outperform. I would outperform a post that they would create for us or whatever, and I would post something else, and it would 10x likes and comments. And so I always tell people, like, if you really believe in your marketing and you say you're as good as you say you are, then prove it. And if you can prove it, then guess what? You got a long-term gig, because I don't want to deal with social media. I don't want to deal with that shit.
I don't even want somebody who's looking at that. I want to find that person that doesn't have a voice, but really, really, really believes in their heart and soul what you do. Like
100%.
Like Mental Joe's got to get out there. And, maybe I can't get my firm involved because we can't take a stance on psychedelics, but you know what? I can donate some time to Chad and Carrie and help them get some things off the ground because, I've always been probably envious of the type of brotherhood certain veterans have, because I've just always been this outsider. Like I said, I don't get along with normal strength coaches because I'm not going to buy into the bullshit and the performance enhancements and the stupid CrossFits and the stupid West Side Barbell and all this bullshit that are delineated from really good strength coaches. Just like on the holistic side, I love my Paul Chapman, I love my stuff, but I'm not going to sit here and act like the Ram Dass men of the world didn't fucking stick their head in a hole. Like, I'm sorry, you're not the hero to me. Where are the major changes? Like, I have maybe, right? So like I've always stuck. So finding friends is hard. Finding people that move at my pace are hard. Finding people to do business for us are hard. So for you, it's like, I would love to find you that guy who's sitting out there who is a retired military person in the marketing business. Like, you know what? You're fucking right. We need to get this message out here. And maybe I can't, I don't care about the money. Like, I just want to see people healthier in a year. So, if you're out there and you're a marketing company and you're veteran based, or you're old, and if you're a veteran owned company, you've gone through the same shit Chad has. You know what I mean? You've gone through that same shit of trying to build something. Not even veteran. If you're an entrepreneur, you know what the hell is of going through these things. And right. So if you're out there, we'd love to have you reach out to us or reach out to Chad. We'll put you in touch with them, which would be great. The other thing I want to talk about too, before we have to wrap up, is you've done a really good job of, getting good athletes behind you, repping the Mental Joe stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about those athletes? Let's give them some recognition.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, a couple of them, early on, I just same thing, just the hustle, right? Just reaching out to people and getting introduced through different networks and things of that nature. But Cody Crowley was like our first athlete, and he's the number one contender for the welterweight in WBC boxing, right? Unfortunately, he had some eye surgery issues. He was getting ready. In fact, I think that fight passed, right? I think it was July he was supposed to fight. And he had eye surgery issues. So he went and got eye surgery. He's back in training camp, but we've done some custom stuff for Cody last year when he fought. We did that, went out to his fight. Great dude. Great all the way around. So he's repped us since kind of day one. And then Marcus McGee, UFC guy, he just got announced, and Marcus we've grown to just be real close buddies now, and we kind of talk about everything. And he's a guy that fights out of the MMA lab right here in Phoenix, along with a lot of other heavy hitters. But Marcus will be fighting. I believe his name is Joseph Martinez, November, and Joseph's the top 15 guy in the UFC. So Marcus is finally going to break, the mold and get in there to get his chance to really climb that UFC ladder. So I'm stoked for him because, I know a lot of the backstory for Marcus and, his struggles. And so he understands what we're doing and what we're trying to go. And he's introduced me to other fighters that wear our gear inside, the MMA lab. And so, yeah, it's cool to kind of see some
right now. You know who would fucking love you? Dana White. There's no way Dana White doesn't fucking love everything you're doing. Like, I know we had talked off camera about Rogan, but Dana is like such a man behind his money type guy and believes in the right. Like, if we could just get some definitely.
But Dana's not a big let's talk about feelings guy. So I don't know how well that would go over.
You know what? I'll tell you this right now. Dana, one thing I do like about Dana is that he's very much, he doesn't do what I hate and I pick out on strength coaches. He's like, this works for me. Doesn't mean it's going to work for you.
Exactly.
Right? And I could see him being like, and a part of Dana would be like this. Yeah, I'm not a big talk about because I understand his mentality. I'm not a big talk about your feelings guy because Dana understands, and I don't know him, but he understands that his level of shit is not you guys' level of shit. And I guarantee you, if Dana sat down and listened to some of the stories that I've listened to with certain veterans about what they've seen overseas or in combat, he would probably be like, yeah, that stuff you should be talking about. Like,
and he's got the same. Yeah, and I think Dana too. If you pulled it off camera again, and I get where Dana's coming from. Like, I'm not saying let's sit here and boo-hoo about our feelings all the time. Like, but let's recognize it. Let's recognize why we might be an asshole. Let's recognize why our fuses might be a little short. I've got nothing wrong with pulling up the bootstraps, shutting your mouth, putting your head down and going to work. Like I did that my whole life. Right. But I've got more reward out of being able to talk about this stuff. Because the other part people don't see about Mental Joe, and we don't advertise it much, is people on the daily reach out to Carrie and I. Of like, hey man, like I'm really going through some shit. Or a lot of wives will reach out to Carrie and say, hey, heard Chad on a podcast, and that story is eerily, similar to my husband's, and would they connect? Like as soon as you and I get done, I've got 2 other calls back to back with 2 veterans that reached out wanting to know about retreats that they could go to Peru or Mexico, or one of them wants to understand ketamine a little bit more. And we have a ketamine center right here in Phoenix that we refer a lot of people to. So what people don't see is the non-sexy stuff of me actually taking the time out of my day to talk to these people. Like, where's your headspace? Where are you at? Do you want to pull the trigger? Why do you want to pull the trigger? Where are you? How many medications are you on? Again, a lot of people don't see it. I'm down almost 70 pounds, right? I eat right now. We were just at a resort this last weekend for Labor Day weekend. I had 1 beer in 2.5 days. The old Chad probably would have had 30 beers. So I look at that stuff and I don't talk about it, but I'm proud of myself knowing that I can have fun with my wife and my boys, and I don't have to have a beer in my hand, So it's those things that the non-sexy things that people don't see that Mental Joe does behind the doors, like the calls that I take, the coffee breaks I go have with folks just to talk to them and get them in a different headspace. Or like you said, me reaching out to you. I try to do a thing once a week where I go through my phone or I'll go through social media and I'll just hit people up, and just ask them, are you good? How you doing, man? And that's it. I just leave it at that, and don't dive into it. So there's a lot of non-sexiness to what we do, but
dude, I'm telling you right now, it's sexy as fuck. Because I the one Sunday you hit me with a "you good," man, I was in a bad fucking place.
Yeah.
I was in a bad place. And I had been in a bad place where I knew some of the stuff wasn't worth me getting upset, but there was so much stuff, like you said, so much of this stuff fucking piles on, right?
It just piles, man.
And I didn't want to call any of my friends because I already know how much of a strain I'd been on them. And and I just was sitting there in such a fucking dark place. And this thing came across and I'm like, this is literally what somebody was like, if this motherfucker can deal with his shit and check on people and then check on me. I was like, that was the bootstrap moment for me. I'm like, it's not that bad. I knew it was bad, but I was like, it's not that bad. Get your ass up and let's get some stuff done. And that's where that's what won me over with you. It's why, I've been on a mission to try and find some way to help you guys. We know about the debacle last summer. To tell the quick story, I reached out to Chad. We were connected through some people. I wanted to do an MMA fight to bring awareness just to mental health for men in general, right? And I wanted to do plus 45, taking an MMA fight a 25-year-old. I was, right? And everyone thought I was fucking crazy except for like 2 people, and you were one of them. And you're like, I'll send you some gear. And then you started, you must have just known if this guy's doing this, he's going through some shit. And then you just stayed on me, and I can never say thank you enough. And we tried to do that fundraiser with Harley Davidson, and that guy kind of fucked it up. And I've always been like, I got to find a way back to helping you guys. And that's a kind of a good segue. One of the things we have coming up, I want you to talk about some of the ways that you get the name Mental Joe out there. And one of the big things we're doing with my company is we're putting a table together at a very large event called RoofCon 24. That's going to be in Orange County, Florida, in Orlando, October 23rd, 24th, 25th. We have a table for you. It's right across from the apparel, another corporate apparel company that we have we're working with for the event. And the thing that blew me away is that when I started telling the RoofCon guys about you and Mental Joe, they were fucking all for it. They were like, where do you want the table?
Yeah.
Well, I was like, well, I want right by the food so people walk by, and they were telling me tons of roofers and tons of solar are either retired military, current military, or military family. And the one part that blew me away about them and it was not odd, but it makes sense, was the owner of RoofCon is a gentleman by the name of Hunter, has a very very supportive of the military, has a very difficult story of his own, how he made it up out of a difficult life and built his company. And he's all about giving back. And the big thing he did is his wife started this thing. So he started a mastermind called Revolt to help, good men that are going through shit in the roofing business find other good men to help with. And his wife started a thing called Revolt X, so that all the wives of these men will then get together. And what do they talk about? What you were talking about before. They're talking about what is it like to be with a man who's so obsessed about his dream, he wants to build this company, and how do you support him and how do you communicate with him? And none of it was bullshit. Like, well, you just do what you're told and you're the woman. It was all about, hey, like I sat in a men's circle where they're like, hey, have you ever asked your wife about what her goals are? Like, what are the goals she's sacrificing to help you build your company? And it brought me back to what you said, is like, no one stopped to say, okay, what is the significant other at home sacrificing in their life to bring you to the ketamine? What are they going through when they see you go into therapy with, you said, bro, these are like you in your life. You're the most alpha kick-ass fucking man that your wife's ever met. And just for her to see you going through pain, where's her support? And when I saw that with Revolt and I saw that with RoofCon, and I said, guys, like, I really I don't want to do a table for my fitness company. I want to do it for Mental Joe. I really want to, I'm going to do a program out there to get the name out and give out stuff. But, coming up October 23rd, 24th, 25th, we're going to have a table for Mental Joe at RoofCon. So if you're in Florida, DM me. I'll hook you up with a ticket to come see the table or something. But you're going to want to come see the table, and you're going to want to see some of the stuff. The design stuff is cool as shit. Like, we haven't even gotten to that. I know we're going to run out of time. But we'll do some more of these, and I'll share some more of the designs, because I think some of the design, I love the buffalo shirt. A lot of people see me drinking from my mug. This is you gotta get it real close, but the Mental Joe logo's on there. I put this on my mug. I'm always usually wearing something, a hat you sent me. But I think what's awesome is the way that RoofCon was like, hey, we want to support this and bring these guys in. And I really want, and you're doing an event, right? Like right around the same days. What expo are you going to be at?
Yeah, so it's called MCon, and it's out in Vegas. So it's essentially a huge military conference. So it's all sorts of military, from guns to apparel to retreats to hunting to you name it, anything military, right? It's this huge military conference. It's held out in Vegas. There's a ton of different speakers from all walks of life. So we'll be doing that. But at the same time, like you said, the RoofCon stuff is going on, so I can't attend, but you're going to kind of hold that space for us there, which I appreciate. And that's just it. Kind of like you were saying with the Revolt stuff, it's just the wife and I, Carrie and I, talk about it all the time, because I didn't understand the trauma that I was causing her with all my blow-ups and all my bullshit. And once we both could set with, psychedelics and, like I said, MDMA, like I really saw my wife for the first time, and I really understood the trauma and all the stuff that she was carrying from even, past relationships she had from childhood to whatever. And it's not earth breaking or earth shattering, right? But it's little things that we do through life that we hold on to this shit. We don't ever address it, and then we carry it on to other relationships. And those other things that we had create, I guess you'd say, brick walls. And so a lot of that stuff's down for Carrie now. We have very open conversations about stuff, and she's having a bad day, I can kind of call her out and be, hey, you're kind of being a bitch today, like, what's going on, like, how can I help? Or if I'm having a bad day, it's, hey, just FYI, giving you a heads up, I'm gonna be a little short today, like I'm gonna go to the gym extra, like it's nothing about you and the boys, I'm just in a really weird headspace. So it's being aware to have that conversation, so now you're not walking around a house feeling tense or going, God, what is she pissed off at me? Like she's really mad. So again, the psychedelics have opened up the ability to have those conversations on a day-to-day basis. So you can hold that space for that individual when they're having a rough day, to be like, hey, how can I take something off your plate? How can I lighten your load?
Well, that's what's important, is the fact that when you do these things together, now there's confidence and a foundation between you and your partner, that when you say to your partner, it's not you, I'm something wrong here, I need space. Yeah. They're not feeling rejection, being like, oh, he's just telling me that, but it's really me.
Yep.
Right. Because I even know as a male, if I've been in a relationship and I say to my female, I'm a very protective male, where if I say to my female, like, you got to solve every problem. So it's like, hey, what's going on with you? And they say, no, it's nothing. I'm having a bad day. Right. That to me is like, oh no, it must have been me. It must have been me. But I've had good relationships with good communication. You're like, it's such a peaceful environment to be able to say, to your significant other, it's not you, it's not the boys, just I don't even know what it is. Just let me have my time and space. And then they can be like, not a problem, honey. I'll hold this down for you. Right. Or the other way, which is where you can say something funny, like, yo, you're being a little bitchy today. And then it's not, hey, you better correct it. Hey, you're going to aggravate me. It's, how can I help you?
Yeah.
What do you need from me?
What can I take off your plate? Because we all have, we're all going through life. We all got something that's going to trigger us through the day and piss us off. But the biggest thing is, how are you reacting to that situation? Are you immediate 1 to 10 and you're flipping out and you're, losing your shit? Or is it, okay, can I control that? Does it really matter in the context of things? How can I, zigzag without getting completely pissed off? So it's just being more present, learning how to deal with different issues. Like, same thing. I still have bad days, but now I can sit back and realize, okay, well, why do I have a bad day? Well, I ate like shit yesterday. I had a piece of, full goddamn Pizza Hut pizza. I didn't go to the gym for 2 days. Like, you got to realize, like, there's other variables that constitute in why you're being pissy or why you're upset. And I feel being more present with that has helped me recognize like where I'm at in those headspaces. So that's the biggest thing I think that's helped me, is to slow down and live more present. Because before, people would always say, I live present. What the fuck does that even mean? Like, I can't, like, my mind is going 100 miles an hour. I don't know what you mean by live present. But again, you slow down, you really realize, like, what is it? Tomorrow's the past, today's the present. The present's the only thing you have, or one of those.
Yesterday's in the past, tomorrow's in the future. Today's the only thing you have.
In the present, right? So I mean, and I can kind of see that and get that. Like, why am I worrying about stuff I can't control? 6 months from now, like most of those scenarios I'm telling myself in the head aren't going to even happen, but because you got that fight or flight mindset, like, you're putting all those negative scenarios out there so you can adjust at the pivot that comes at you. Well, why? Like, let go of that shit. When it approaches, it approaches, and you deal with it the best way you can deal with it when it's there in your face. Not worry about it for 6 months and then none of that shit happens, and now you just worried about stuff that you put energy into that doesn't matter.
Yeah, agreed. I want to wrap up real quick because I know you just mentioned you got the calls. We got a good hour in. I could talk to you all day about this. I think there's so much more. I have like 5 more questions I kind of wanted to peel back with you.
Yeah.
But we'll cut some up and we'll get some other things done. The most important couple points I'd like people to leave this with are: 1, it does take a village, and more now than ever. And the positive of social media is that our villages are more connected, and the negative is our villages are more connected with some of the wrong people. So
yeah,
I'm going to say this. If I've seen this on a TV ad, it was actually a VA ad, and I thought it was decent, where it said, hey, if you're a vet and you need help, and I'm like, well, I've worked with a lot of people, not just vets, but people that are very negative mindsets. The hardest thing is to actually make that request for help. Yeah. And then, right, it's like when you're in your deepest, darkest moment, the last thing you want it, but the last thing you can do is ask for it.
Yeah.
But it made the comment, like, if you know someone. And I thought that that's a great theme we talked about, is that if you are the caregiver, if you're in love, if you're the husband or wife of someone, especially a veteran who's going through this, and you really feel lost, we didn't touch upon it, but there's so much we could talk about where, let's say the VA, I want to say the VA system, because I know there's really good people who work at the VA. We know that, right? So let's say the system as a whole is not optimally doing what it should be doing, right? Like, so without being negative, it's just not optimally doing what it's doing. So if you feel like that, and you don't even want to open up to Chad, like, DM me. I know Carrie's Instagram. If you're the wife of a veteran, like, Carrie, and it was funny because I had seen some of her posts, and that made me really feel very much alone and wanting a partner. She went through like it was a post to you, and it was
Yeah.
about, you know, what she was going through, and thank God you got to this place. And I was like, oh my God, like I could feel her burden kind of being relieved at the fact that this person that was her whole world and the father of her children was healing, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, maybe that's what we're missing. Maybe we need to start reaching out to the caregivers and those people, because they will reach out for help, but they don't know who to, and they're getting every door slammed in their face, right? So, you know, if you are the caregiver or the loved one, if it's your uncle, your aunt, it doesn't even have to be, you know, your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife. If it's your uncle, if it's your cousin, if it's your brother, if it's your friend, and you feel like they're in a place and you don't know how to approach them, like give us a fucking DM or call. Like between you and me, we'll answer it. We'll get you in touch with Chad, or Chad will get you in touch with the right people. And, you know, we're all about just keeping that message moving. You know, the more people we can help, that, you know, and the only thing we ask when we help people, right? We were talking about this off camera. If we help you, we just ask you, like, help us back get more people help.
Yeah. I mean, and that's one of the reasons, you know, when I started this thing, you know, I didn't know where to go. Right. I didn't know what was what. I mean, 5 years ago, I never would have touched cannabis. I never would have touched psychedelics. Like, I didn't know who was right, who was wrong, or, you know, where to go for this information. So we, as an apparel company, we have a little resource tab, and we've got podcasts on there. We've got articles. We've got retreats on there. We've got ketamine clinics. So I try to be like, I don't want to ever say that we're a source of truth by any means, right? I don't want to ever say that. But we have information there to where if you're curious and you want to understand this stuff, by the click of a button, you can listen to a podcast, you can read an article, and we try to source all this stuff by ourselves and, you know, update our website to give those people that are curious about this stuff some kind of context that they can get a little bit of research on it. Because same thing, there's so much information out there, people don't know where to go. And again, the average Joe doesn't know where to go for this stuff or even where to start looking. So we try to create that space so people can have the ability to say, oh, let me just listen to this podcast and get a little taste for, you know, what Chad and everyone's talking about with these psychedelics. Because again, like you said it, and again, I try to hold the very neutral space of, you know, I get everybody, you know, in the psychedelic ecosystem, right? Everyone's got their quirks about them, you know, but again, if you look at the average Joe, right, he's going to look at it and be like, well, I don't need a nose ring with purple hair and dreads and all this stuff and the goddamn hippies. And, you know, again, I get where they're coming from, but love those people and love that space that they're holding for those individuals and everything else. Love it. That's their jam. But again, like that's the space I'm trying to hold, is that very average Joe, middle America guy that drives the F-150, but is again numbing life out with that bottle of JD, and he doesn't think there's another way because the traditional way of talk therapy and SSRIs, it just isn't working. And there's more and more studies out there that are saying, you know, SSRIs are just as good as a sugar pill. They really don't work. They're numbing you out. They don't really help. I mean, and again, I hate big pharma. So I'm going to talk about big pharma in a very negative context because I lived it for 20 years. I did the talk therapy. I did SSRIs. I did all the bullshit that they said you needed to do within this box to heal. I did it and I haven't healed. I've done psychedelics, you know, here sporadically the last 4 years. And guess what? I could probably say I'm a better individual now than I was 5 years ago.
Yeah. And the analogy I put on that is the same thing in the fitness world. It's like, it's just right in front of your face. We don't want to know. It's like there's all these new training systems, all these new diets, yet Americans are fatter and more obese and our kids are more unhealthy. So something's not fucking working with what you're telling us to do.
Exactly.
Right? Like it's the same thing with you're going through. It's like you told me all these things were gonna help my mental health. It didn't work. Then suddenly I did this under control. Like, and I want to make this point here. Chad didn't go out with his buddies in the middle of the fucking forest, drum on some drums, throw down something and be like, wow, I feel fucking great now. It's like, you know, he went to people who have either degrees or medical degrees or have backgrounds, or, you know, this was very controlled in the measure. And that's one of the most important parts. So one of the things I want to leave everybody here with is that if you are the caretaker, reach out to us. We'll get the person you care about somewhere, somehow, some way help. If at worst, we're going to get you some knowledge to start reading and opening the door. 2, if you are a veteran-owned or based organization, you know, and I'll say at this point, I don't care what you do, reach out to us.
Yeah.
You're right. You guys got to stick together. And maybe there's a guy out there that has a high position in a marketing company. We can get him involved in helping you out. And the last thing I want to say is keep an eye out. In October, you're going to see it all over my social media page, but we're going to have a nice kick-ass Mental Joe table at RoofCon, and just, we expect 4,000 to 5,000 attendees. And my job is to make sure every single person walks out there knowing exactly what Mental Joe is and what they do. So those of you, I got to wrap it up, but any questions you guys have, if you're uncomfortable, please DM us, or you can DM Chad. I'm going to put all the information in the posts. www.mentaljoe.com is the website. Yep. It's simple. At Mental Joe Apparel is all of your social media handles. So Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. You're going to get on LinkedIn. Otherwise, you're going to see a lot more stuff. Chad, I'm going to say thank you really from the bottom of my heart, man. Like you helped me stay on track, last summer. And I don't know, there would be a lot more buildings burnt down in Orlando if it wasn't for you. So somebody in Orlando needs to thank you besides me. Man, like I said this to you offline the other day, like I'm putting foot to ass at this expo for you. It's the least I could do for you. And I think it's the least we could do for everyone else out there that's hurting. And I agree. I think if we help a small community, per se, of veterans, that's just going to exponentially help the people that aren't veterans, right? Like, we can really make a huge dent in the government and the FDA and everybody else to be like, fuck, like this is working for the people with the worst trauma. Then we can expand to people with a little bit less trauma, and we can get rid of the stigmatism, and we can finally make people mentally healthy.
Agreed.
So,
Agreed.
Joe, hang on. Joe, I always do that. Chad, hang on. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, like the first 2 months, I kept calling him Joe.
I just roll with that. Everyone calls me Joe. I've got people still hit me up that know my name's Chad and they'll call me Joe, and I just whatever. I just roll with it. It's part of it now.
Yep. I'm going to hit the outro music and all that. Stay on for me with you. Otherwise, everybody, please take a look at one of the events we have coming up where Mental Joe will be at. Otherwise, everybody, very much. We should be hitting the music, and we are out.